An odd title, I'll admit, but I guess you'll have to hear me out. Men and women, human beings in general, but men and women of the past were in touch with each other and themselves in a way that modern human beings in the year 2014 are simply not. I'm not saying that they better understood the world, that they had access to greater scientific understanding. That's, of course, far from the truth. It's quite the opposite. But even a few hundred years ago, and certainly thousands of years ago, men and women, humans, really knew a lot more about each other than we at least profess to know right now. Now, if you'd listened to my Contented Irrationalist video, I talked a little bit about the grand distraction, this modern smokescreen that we've erected around ourselves. Now, one thing I've talked about in the past has been the mechanization effect. What I haven't talked about with regards to the mechanization effect, this massive industrialization, computerization, technifying of the world, is the layer, or rather are the layers of distraction and confusion that this mechanization effect has helped create. Notice that I mentioned in the Contented Irrationalist that we're always looking for a way out of, well, in the case of the immortality project, of death. And the distractions of modernity are unparalleled. We have the internet. We have music that we can download at a click. We have television shows online. We have film. We have special effects. We have video games. We have almost everything out there. I mean, what we have today in terms of distraction, in terms of entertainment, that's the word, isn't it? It's entertainment. It's unparalleled. It's unrivaled. And a lot of this entertainment, these distractions, the smokescreen, all of this has served in a very potent way to deceive human beings. And we deceive ourselves and distract ourselves, and we get lost. 500,000 years ago, people didn't have the luxury of getting lost in the myriad fantasies that we live in today. They didn't have the luxury to pretend not to be human beings. What do I mean by pretending not to be human beings? Well, as I said, human beings of the past, if you read any of the literature, any of the observations, hell, you can even read the Bible, were much more in touch with their nature than we are at the present. We can afford, at least on some level, to ignore our nature to a degree. We pay a price for that, but we can afford it to a degree. 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, even 500 years ago, this was not possible. You could not simply ignore your own nature, be you a man or a woman, and get away with it, because the environment was a lot harsher. In fact, the environment and the world that people lived in a few hundred years ago, millennia ago, was so harsh by comparison that this kind of realpolitik, up-in-your-face understanding of what it meant to be men and women really was necessitated by the world. There was no choice in the matter. Women knew what men were, and men knew what women were. And by that, I don't mean some sort of romanticized classic manly man or feminine woman. They knew what women wanted, and they knew what men wanted, in a strict biological sense. One thing the mechanization effect has led to is this smokescreen that we can't even understand what we are anymore. And more importantly, we don't want to understand. If you've taken anything home from my video, The Contented Irrationalist, it's that people really don't care whether they understand things or not, whether they're irrational or not. These are low down on the priority list. What's important, though? Feeling. And this is the kind of dystopia that we've created in modernity. And we can get away with it to a degree because of all the distractions. the entertainment, the environment. Never in the history of humanity have we had this much wealth, this much comfort, this much luxury. Even poor people such as myself, we have more than people hundreds of years ago could have dreamt of. And so we allow ourselves to be deceived. We allow ourselves to deceive ourselves. What specifically am I talking about? I'm talking about the very real and significant differences between men and women, their different interests, their different drives, their different reasons for being, their raison d'être, if you will. These were pretty well understood back in the day. Not so much these days. Instead, we paint this canvas of fictitious love and mystical connection and bonding and soulmates, and this claptrap is all very new. And isn't it an interesting coincidence that all of this arose approximately at the same time when the mechanization effect really started booming and kicking in? It was only then that people could afford to actually think this kind of stuff, this kind of dream stuff, love bonds and soulmates and all this mystic garbage that people keep on peddling to make a hefty profit, and if not, they actually believe it themselves, either or. People of the past couldn't afford to believe that because it could have killed them. That's how harsh the environment was. And so they got along and survived by a dogged adherence to reality and the realities that both men and women faced. What I'm talking about here, quite simply, is the difference between men and women. The fact that we are fundamentally different. There's no denying that if you look at the evidence. Fundamentally different in our behavior, in our interests, in our outlooks of the world. And because we are fundamentally different, certainly in terms of our reproductive aims and goals and strategies, and these goals and strategies help very much to shape the kinds of people we become as men and women. It's important to pay attention to these things. It's important to get rid of all the fluff. Now, before I proceed, let me tell you, I have no interest in pursuing a relationship. I'm not interested, per se, in saving relationships. I think it's very unlikely I'll ever have a relationship again before my death. But Stardust is ever the realist. I know that the world shan't change because I want it to, and it's not going to change because I think it might, or it'd be nice that it would, if it did in fact change. No, the world will remain relatively static. That said, of course, most men and most women, certainly women not, but most men are not going to swear off relationships with women. I mean, the MRA, whatever good it does, I mean, they spend a lot of time talking about this bond between men and women, how men and women need to work together and blah, blah, blah. So they're on that page. And I've seen it in the comments section. I've listened to videos. I've read it over and over. The simple fact of the matter is that far more MGTOW than we care to admit are one blowjob away kind of guys. I don't mean that they're going to abandon ship the minute some woman opens up her mouth to suck his dick. I mean, they're still pining away for that soulmate, that this idea. It's just an idea. It's a nebulous, unsolidified idea of some woman rushing in and saving him from his own damnation. I can hear it in their voices. I can see it in their words. I can recognize it. I see it. I understand it. Many MGTOW fit this profile. And look, clearly a lot of MGTOW like dating and still enjoy women's company. It's not something I personally can comprehend or understand. It's really beyond me. I have no desire whatsoever to associate with women beyond what my daily expenditures demand of me. But I recognize reality for what it is. So, if human beings, the world over, want to save the relationship between men and women, they're going to have to do some long, hard thinking. And they're going to have to give up a lot of the fairy tales that they've either been indoctrinated into or indoctrinate themselves into believing. It's that simple. Men need to be candid and frank, and so do women. Men need to be told and need to become aware of the fact that women view them primarily as utilities, as providers, as means to an end, means to sustenance. Likewise, men need to be frank with women. Yes, men in fact view you primarily as sexual objects to be fucked. That is your primary role in the eyes of most men. That's just nature, just like it's your nature to view men as utilities. Just two sides of the same coin. Now, if you can start with that premise and don't have a nervous breakdown because you can't get to grips with reality and the reality of yourself and your opposing gender, there might be some chance of quote-unquote saving the relationship between men and women. It's only a rational, detached, in touch with reality approach to a relationship between men and women that's going to actually bring about any sort of change and any sort of profit. And by profit, I mean success. It's a very simple thing. Men and women need to start being honest to each other. They need to stop lying to each other about their intentions. They need to realize that that relationship is just a contractual arrangement. Whether the contract is officially written out or not, that's what it is. You fulfill your end, the other person fulfills his or her end. If you're a man, you're there to give stuff to the woman, and if you're a woman, you're there to suck his dick and fuck him. It's that simple, really, at the end of the day. And then perhaps raise the children. Now, I'm not talking about gender roles here. I'm talking about what our biology dictates to us. Now, you don't have to do that. But the simple fact of the matter is, human beings haven't changed a lot in the last couple of thousand years. When women, this has been said a million times, when women say they want something and means something else, that's because women have a very poor understanding of their own desires. They don't understand anything about science, their own evolution, and men for that matter as well. Although men know they want to fuck, and men are willing to just put up a fantastic, fantastic wall of lies to either blind themselves or others to that fact. I don't know how many men, how many friends I've asked, well, you're not really interested in having conversations. Oh, yes, of course I am. And then I ask, well, what if you couldn't fuck her? Well, no. That's the punchline. There's nothing wrong with men objectifying women sexually, just as there's nothing wrong with women objectifying men financially. Wrong in some sort of moralizing sense. No, I mean, there are consequences. There can be negative consequences to both sorts of things. But the point I'm trying to make is only a hardened grasp of reality and the science behind the sexes will allow for any sort of functional relationship, if that's what you want to pursue. And let's face it, most people are going to want to pursue relationships. I cannot fathom for the life of me why a man going his own way would want, apart from sex, to have a relationship with a woman. I don't really grasp how someone who's actually understood these things could possibly want that, even though I know many do. And seeing that and realizing that, I'm offering a bit of advice. You cannot afford to lie to yourself or lie to the other person about your intentions. Because there's actually a high price that's been paid for all these lies and all these fictions and all these fairy tales that we've been telling ourselves. A look at the divorce court will tell us. Men don't know what the hell is happening. Women don't either, but they're initiating the divorces anyway. Men end up in relationships where they, more often than not, lose lots of money, and in the worst case scenarios, they lose their lives because they can't deal with the emotional pain. Chickens without heads, both men and women, in modernity. Because we've allowed the entertainment to distract us from what we really are. It is a relationship of mutual exploitation, a relationship of give me that, take that, give me that. That's all it is. There's no mystic love bond. And let's be honest, science is such that you could take two random people off the street, a man and a woman, and synthetically produce the correct amounts of dopamine, of estrogens and androgens in each other's bodies to create a falling in love scenario. That's right. You could quite literally, in a laboratory with sufficiently skilled scientists, create a "I'm in love with you" mystic bond feeling in both of these people, even though they had nothing to do with each other up until a couple of minutes prior, and even though they normally wouldn't be attracted to each other. You could induce this artificially. That's how this powerful love bond works. Now, given that it's that trivial, isn't it time that people just have an honest discussion, honest talk with each other and with the rest of the world? I mean, this includes everyone. MRAs and blue pillars having relationships, MGTOW pining away for some love that doesn't exist. If you want it, go for it. But be honest with yourself and be honest with the person you're involved with. If Stardust were ever to have a relationship, which I cannot fathom having that, because every time I think about it, I remember the past. I remember observations I made. I remember observations I make now observing other people. And also, having a relationship is just basically to have regular sex. And what did Barbarossa always like to say? The juice just isn't worth the squeeze. But were I to do so, I would lay out the terms very, very clearly. I would ask what the female wants, and if I could somehow align myself with those terms and at least modify them to my own liking or mold them, I would lay out my terms, and there would be a kind of contract of a sort, and if that contract is met, then the relationship is functional, and if not, it's over. Cold, rational calculus. Unfortunately, this is the only thing that's going to make a relationship work, not lovey-dovey, fluffy talk about mystical pair bonding and all this other garbage and how men and women need to respect each other's differences and blah, blah, blah. Yes, respect each other's differences by understanding them. That's it. Not respecting them and saying, oh, this is special. No, it's not. It is what it is. This is how you can save relationships. This is how relationships can be saved. By simply being in touch with reality, with not denying the things that make you feel uneasy, unpleasant, because your fairy tale of entertainment has been shattered. That's all there is. It is a business contract. And if you can live a life and have a relationship on those terms, then you should. Most men and most women are not going to abandon relationships. That's the reality out there. And most MGTOW aren't either, for that matter. At least voluntarily. Most MGTOW are going to continue to yearn and pine away for this mystic love bond, for this woman who's going to come in and sweep him off his feet from his world of despair and isolation and loneliness. Now, there is no salvation there. All there is a cold, hard calculus. And if you want to engage in that calculus yourself, well, you're more than welcome to. But be aware of the reality and be aware of the consequences of not accepting that reality. We've seen the consequences. Look at Robin Williams. Look at every man who's ever decided to take his life, who fell into the blackest, deepest pits of depression. And women, well, women for the most part are these headless chickens running around not having a fucking clue why they think the things they think, how they think the things they think. Men somewhat less so, but it's also true for them. But women are particularly guilty of this offense, and it's not an offense, it's just stupidity, it's ignorance. The willingness to willfully ignore reality, even at the cost of understanding the self. Not too many sins on that level out there, but there you have it. For the reasons I discussed in the Contented Irrationalist. Shape the world to your feelings, and everything will be fine. But we're at that juncture in time, ladies and gentlemen. We can't afford it anymore. We can't afford to simply lie to each other. Men can't afford to lie to themselves, and women can't afford to lie to themselves either. Or this so-called relationship, the mystic bond that men and women allegedly share, it's going to fall apart even more. It's going to degenerate and deteriorate even more. No, not unless men and women grab each other by the collar and say, look, I'm here to fuck you, and I'm here to take your resources. And that's it. That's all there is. Yes, there are intricacies, there are details, but at the end of the day, at the bottom line, that's what it is. And if you can live comfortably with that, let's do it. And if not, don't do it. But don't pretend to care about each other. Don't pretend any of this bullshit, because that pretense usually just ends up in the ledger of some courtroom with a lot of money out the window. That's how much that pretense is worth. Very simple, cold, hard, rational calculus. That's what not just MGTOW need to do, not just women, not just MRAs, not just feminists, the gods forbid, but all of humanity. Get rid of this politically correct, self-deceptive garbage and replace it with reality. And a lot of problems will be solved. You might not be quote-unquote happy, your self-esteem might be hurt, but you'll be recovering a lot more in the way of clear thought and perception. In the long run, you probably will be happier as a result of it. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this. You want to save the relationship? Those are my suggestions. Not that I want one. Stardust out.